what percentage of students in the district
Mm-hmm.
Are in special education?
We have approximately 16% of
Okay.
our population.
Okay, so we have 4,500 students. 16% of that number is the number of students receiving special education services. How is a student found eligible?
So how a student is found eligible is it's done by a team process, which includes the family, the parents. And depending on the age of the student, it may also include the student. So when they're older, we definitely want them included because they can better describe what's going on for them. So what typically happens is either the family or maybe a school-based team who has been working with that student in response to intervention, because there's a lot of services that we give that are not in special education.
Okay, so response to intervention, people might
One
not
way.
know what that is. Response to intervention is a process that we have implemented to provide support for students who may be struggling
Right.
academically.
Additional services.
Right. Okay.
So it may be that particular team, or it could be a teacher or the student, and it could be the family that says, listen, we really think there's something else going on here. So they would request and refer the student to special ed. Once they start that referral, everything in special education is timelined and regulated, either through federal or state regulations. So once we've received that referral, we're required to provide a team meeting within 10 school days or 10 business days. We review the referral, and then the team can make a decision whether or not they want to continue to evaluate. And what I think is often confusing for people is when we say the word evaluation, a lot of people think, oh, it's a set of papers, it's a report, it's something that people have done, when it's really the verb form of evaluation. We're evaluating the whole situation holistically to see whether that child is eligible. And that often includes doing testing, educational testing, cognitive testing, testing of the memory, testing, looking at social emotional difficulties, but we're actually evaluating the whole child holistically to determine whether or not they meet the criteria for eligibility.
Can a doctor say, Bob, your child should be receiving special ed services?
No, they really can't. It's a team decision that has certain members that are part of that. The doctor can certainly say, hey, you may want to bring this to the school team to review, but they actually, just like I can't prescribe medication to that child, or say that child needs an appendectomy, they can't say to us that child needs or requires an IV or a 504 plan.
But can a doctor or a therapist or a counselor, can they recommend accommodations or modifications?
They can recommend, we can accept any type of report essentially from those folks. We typically will accept reports that contain standardized scores. In other words, when the student's being compared to in a very structured way to other students. They can certainly give recommendations, they can certainly give ideas, and the team is obligated to consider those things. We're not obligated to follow everything that's being asked for or recommended.
I think that's a great
consider.
point. Right.
And when we do consider, I will say the teams do look at these things very carefully, and they may not agree to everything. Keeping in mind, just like we're not in the doctor's office, those doctors are not in our schools, or those clinicians are not necessarily in our schools observing what's really happening. So some of the recommendations that are given are either already happening or don't make a lot of sense. So that's why we consider. And some of them we may follow, and some we may not. And that's really for any student. They don't have to be in special education. They don't need to have a 504 plan. It could just be a concern that a family has, and they could certainly talk to their school-based team regarding what are some of those concerns and recommendations.
Okay. What is the team's goal for a child who is receiving special education services?
Well, I think anyone's goal of a student with a disability is that they're able to resolve the disability and no longer have that. However, I think the reality is the majority of our students, if they're identified as having a significant special education disability, a learning disability, is that means they're probably going to have ongoing issues because of the brain processes that are impacted by that particular disability. But our ultimate goal is to have students to be educated to the greatest extent possible with their peers, in their home schools, with the kids their same age, in their neighborhood school, and in the general ed classroom to the greatest extent possible. But the I of individual education program says that we have to make decisions based on that individual student's needs. And sometimes that typical classroom environment is not the best place for them to learn that particular skill. And that's when we start doing more of those pull-out services. But in general, our teachers are trying to keep them into the regular ed environment. We want them there with their peers and providing a high-quality education.
And it doesn't mean that students on an IEP can't continue their education beyond
Oh,
high
absolutely
school.
not. No,
So
we
you
have
have a lot of students who've
we have
done
a lot
very
of
well.
students have gone on, and what we're finding a new trend in the higher education is that they're now providing additional types of college programs. Now, students may not be earning, let's say, an engineering degree, but they may be earning, some type of certificate regarding transition services at the college level and things along those lines. So those are new trends. In fact, there's a new program at Rhode Island College that's doing that particular component, and I know that URI is looking at a similar type of program for kids with disabilities. So it doesn't mean they won't go on to higher education. In fact, we expect most of our students will go on to higher education. And once they're in higher education, they also can receive some accommodations. They're not going to have an IEP, but they can receive accommodations in the college world also. And many of our students need that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sam.
You're welcome.